Thanks for everyone joining today. My name is Daryl. I manage sales here at Comalatech, part of the customer success team. Um, and today we'll be looking at Comala document management for data center, server data center. Server is ending life, but data center is definitely still available, and Comala document management is available for that platform as well. As I mentioned earlier, today's session should take within about 30 to 45 minutes. We have a number of different features that we want to cover today, so we definitely want to ensure that you guys get the most out of this time as well. So a little bit about Comalatech. Comalatech's been in the ecosystem for just over 13 years now, and we're an app vendor in the Atlassian marketplace. We have a number of apps, both for Confluence and Jira. But our flagship product is Comala Document Management, which we'll be talking about today. And that and Comala Document Management has been in the ecosystem for just as many years, 13 years now. And we'll be talking about a lot of the great features in that today as well. We also have complementary apps that help your workforce as well. We have Comala Publishing. We have Comala Read Confirmations. We have Comala boards and lists. We have a number of different apps to help with Confluence. We also have Comala Canvas for Jira products as well. So feel free to look at the marketplace listings to just read up more about those products if you wish to climb to. Um, so what is Comala Document Management? Well, at the essence, Comala Document Management um, lets organizations achieve effective work management by applying process and control to your collaborated Confluence content. And that's done by means of adding reviews and approvals to your content. What really differentiates us from other marketplace vendors other marketplace vendors out in the marketplace is really uh, the depth of customizations that are offered to allow to match to your business requirements or business needs. Um, and we'll be touching on a lot of those today as well. Now, may not be able to get through everything, but feel free to either ask me directly, Daryl at Comalatech.com, or you can also visit our wiki.comalatech.com to get more information on a lot of that stuff as well. You don't have to write that down. That information will be supplied to you after today's webinar in an email that you'll receive from me. Um, Comala Document Management has well over 5,000 customers that are utilizing it around the world. We have a lot of Fortune 100, 500,000 and Fortune 1,000 customers using it as well. And not to mention just organizations that are looking to add process and control to their Confluence content, and that are smaller teams as well. And the great thing about it is you can use the app right out of the box with some templated workflows, so you don't necessarily have to customize anything, or you can get even more creative and use some of our use customized functionality within the app itself. A lot of our customers today use Comala Document Management for wikis, for QMS systems, for knowledge bases are a big one right now. And with the pandemic as it is right now, and a lot of people working from home, there's a lot of compliance regulatory um, requirements, and people are using Confluence for compliance, and not to mention HR policies or just policies in general as well. Um, in today's agenda, what we'll be taking a look at in the live webinar is um, the process of reviewing and approving the content. Um, are what I refer to as one of the main features of Comala Document Management, which is their draft versus published view. How to build and configure your app or the app itself, and with your business requirements in mind. And last but not least, the data analysis, not just data collection. So what are we actually capturing when we do a review and approval as well. All right, so I'm going to close off that presentation and get into right into the app itself. So you'll see here that I have a Confluence page up right here. That page is part of a space called Vancouver, and within that space itself, I have again pages that all rely to me. Obviously, the pages and spaces that you have in your environment are going to be unique to you and to your content itself. Now, and obviously that means that your page hierarchy and your content are all going to be different from what you see in my examples here. But and this is the great thing about Comala Document Management. Comala Document Management doesn't really care what type of content you create. We add an approval process or process control to your pages and to your content in Confluence itself. And so when you go to a page in Confluence, you'll notice that the first thing you'll see here is oops, give an error there. But we have a page here that is just a simple page. And so when we go to that page, we can now, I guess I need to just log in real quick here. And so when I go to my page, you'll notice that I have a status bar right on the page itself, and what uniquely defines Comala Document Management. And this progress bar, status bar, what it indicates is the status or phase of your document, of your workflow that you're currently in for this particular page. Now, what we typically recommend in production is that Comala Document Management is activated or initialized at the space level. What that does is once it's activated or initialized at the space level, all pages that are current existing pages that are in your space, and for every new page that gets created, this particular workflow is automatically applied to that page. Now we understand that there's different requirements for everyone, and the key theme that you'll see today or you hear today is flexible. And Kamala document management is flexible in how we activate or initialize the workflow as well. So you could have, for example, one overarching workflow that indicates that that particular workflow is going to be applied at your space level, or that is applied to every page that gets created or every existing page that is new. You can also have a workflow applied via a label as well. And I'll show you how that's done a bit later. But by doing so, adding that label, you can have a secondary workflow applied on the space as well, which is really nice. So now you have that flexible option of having one overarching workflow and then a specific dedicated workflow for a particular set of pages, perhaps. And that's all activated via a label as well. So again, the word is flexible, and that's the great thing about Comala Document Management. Now, what we have here is, again, a page that's currently in the in progress status that's indicated by the status bar itself. And the status bar always lives underneath the page title. So it's very, it's in the face of the user. And this particular workflow itself, when I click on it, what opens up is our workflow UI or the status bar UI. And the workflow UI will provide you a comment. The author can approve or reject. And more importantly, they can add or select a reviewer to assign the reviewer to this page to review. Now, I should mention that the status bar itself is visible to all users that have page or edit rights to the space. So if you don't have edit rights to the space, then you will never see the status bar itself. You'll only see the dedicated page that you've created your content in. And that's great when you have pages that are anonymous that we saw earlier when I didn't have a login, or pages that you just don't want people to be able to edit. You just want to give them or supply them with the final page itself that's been reviewed and approved. So going back to the approval process, so now that we have our approval our UI available here, as I mentioned, you can assign a user by clicking on that add review button, but there's actually a second option as well. So we have a lot of customers of ours that set reviewers individual reviewers or groups directly into the workflow. And that's nice because a reviewer can then be assigned automatically when the page is created and the workflow is applied to that page. And by doing so, they would receive an email notification notifying them that they've been assigned. And again, it can be either individuals or an individual or a group of people as well, a Confluence group that can be assigned to review as well. So again, the flexibility is all in your fingertips, and whatever you need for your workflow, you can definitely assign to it. In this example, we're going to assign a dedicated individual. So I'm going to click on Add Reviewer, and I'm going to go ahead and assign a user. And this user I'll say is L, and I'm going to check her name, and I'll say what to do. So I'll say, please review the requirements section. Okay. And I'll assign that to her, and she can then she'll now be assigned with her avatar now listed on the page itself. You'll notice that as the author, once I've assigned L, the approve and reject buttons are grayed out here. So she doesn't have, or I don't have the ability to approve or reject this because it's currently in L's name. Now, if L was in here and I noticed that, oh, L's not here, I could also select her name and reassign this to someone else as well. So I can search for Adam, for example, and I can reassign that to Adam and just untick L and reassign it to Adam as well if I knew that L wasn't available to be assigned to. As I mentioned earlier, L would receive a email in her inbox notifying her that she's been assigned to review content. And this is what the email looks like when she gets assigned. Oops. And it says that Daryl assigned the approval review to the page Comala Document Management. What is it? And it tells her what to actually do because I put that in the comments. So it tells her, please review the requirements section. And so I can now click on the link here, which will take me directly to the approval process, our approval workflow window, or I can click on the page name to take me directly to the page itself. I actually have L, just need to sign in as L here. So it's going to make me sign in. Okay, so I just need to log in as L. And now that I've logged in as L, I can go directly, if I want to, I can go directly to the Confluence dashboard. And in the Confluence dashboard, we add a My Comala document management actions. These are actions that you've been assigned to. It could be either assigned by, obviously assigned by a reviewer, assigned by the, assigned to review, assigned to complete a task. But these are actions that are listed in Comala Doc Management for me, the user, as in this case, L, to complete. So this is a silent notification that gets applied directly onto the dashboard of Confluence. The other notification that we add is a notification to the workbox, or also known as what I like to refer to as the bell button. And so this is a third notification that the user receives, again, a silent notification that the user receives to complete the review process. So I can click on the page, which will take me directly to the page, and I can now complete the process of reviewing the page itself. Now, the workflow that we see here, it's currently in the in progress state, and when approved, it will go to the next state of approved. However, if I reject it, it would stay in the current state of in progress. And I can put a comment in as L as to why I am rejecting that. Now you can transform your workflow, and we'll take a look at how you can transform your workflows, any of the templated workflows or any custom workflow that you create by customizing how your workflow phases and states work. So again, this is just using one of our workflow called the simple approval workflow. And this may be just fine for your use case, but you may need more than that as well. And that's where you can start customizing your states and phases and how that works with your requirements or with your business case. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll approve that. So once I approve it and I'll say looks great, this approval is completed. Okay. And so now that the approval is approved, all users will now see this approved data or this approved page. Okay. I have another example here. We'll look at the standard operating procedure. And you'll notice here that this particular page is in published. Now, what happens when a page gets edited? So the page is approved, it's all great, all dandy, and the page is now, however, it needs to be reviewed or it needs to be edited to ensure that it's still valid. So we'll go ahead and edit this content. And I'll say, I'll make a update here with Comalatech and our apps. And I will update that. And now you'll notice that this particular page is now in, has two views here. It has a published view and it has a draft view. And so you are aware all users that, again, that only have view rights or anonymous rights to this page will only ever see the last approved version. That's the published version. For any users that are content contributors or editors or have the permission in Confluence to add pages, which also has the ability to edit pages, you will now see both the draft and published view. And this is great for, again, for when you're going through that re-review process and you want to ensure that people still see my published content, but the edits are only seen or visible to the page editors or contributors of this space. And if I want to see the difference between what was done and what was added and what wasn't, well, Confluence has a native feature called page history, and we don't want to take over that native function. So users can see what the differences were between the current version and the version that was updated. And you'll see here that in green, what was updated. So now when I go through my process of reviewing, and as an author, if I'm ready now in this particular workflow, oops, go back to the page. So now in this particular workflow, when I click on ready, you'll see that there's a few differences here. Once that this now has different states and phases. So this has a draft, has a ready, it has a reviewed state, has a published, and it has a needs review state as well. Not to mention, it has two users, L and Milo, that were automatically assigned. So I didn't have to assign anyone here, unlike the previous example where we had to assign L. This case, L was automatically assigned, and that's the auto set feature that I talked about earlier when you're working with your workflow. So now L just needs to either approve or reject this. Now, again, if I reject this, it goes back to the draft state. But if I approve it, it'll proceed on to my reviewed state. Let's say we had, or in this case, I have L and Milo assigned to it, and I wanted to set a fast tracked approval, which means that I only need one user to approve this to move this forward. Well, you can actually set a fast tracked approval in your workflow that will eliminate the need for all users to review. I only need the first person who comes to first person of that reviewer group who's been assigned to review it. And once they review it, it will transition automatically to my next state, in this case, the reviewed state. Again, folks, these states and names that you see here can all be mixed and matched, and they can be customized to your liking. I created this generally for my needs and my particular workflow requirement. And in fact, what I did is I took one of our templated workflow, the QMS workflow, and just modified that. But again, your needs and your requirements could all be different based on whatever you need for your business case. In this example, again, I'll go ahead and approve this. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and reject this. And I'll say, please retype the purpose and scope. Okay, and I'll reject that as L. So now, and then Milo in this case would have to reject that as well. So because both are required to review. So now, and again, if I only needed one person to reject that to transition it back, then I could have set that up as well as a fast track rejection as well. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and log out as L and log back in as Milo so I can complete that rejection. And again, I was assigned as a reviewer. And so it's sitting on my dashboard. So I can go ahead now and reject this workflow as Milo. And Milo rejected that. So that's now in the draft state again. Now in the draft state, you'll notice that I don't have an approval here. This is just a submission. So the author will go ahead and make their updates as necessary. And once the author has made their updates, then the workflow can be kicked off. So once the author is ready to do so, that author can then submit this to the next state, which is the ready state. So, and they could add some comments if they want before they submit that, but I'm going to go ahead and submit that for approval. And again, it's sitting in with Milo and L. And I'm going to say looks great now. And Milo has completed his approval. And now I'll log out. And I'll log in as L again. And again, complete this portion of the approval process. In this case, it's the reviewed state. So L is going to go ahead and say, much better, approved. Doesn't necessarily have to write that because the approval itself, by clicking the approve button, indicates that you've approved it. And now you can see that it's sitting in the reviewed state, and it's sitting within a group of mine called the SME group. Now, L is part of that SME group. So she is part of what we refer to as the editor-in-chief, who needs to give the final approval before it's sent to published. And she can reject that, which will go back to the previous state called ready, or she can say, looks great. Yeah. And approve it. Now that she's approved it, you'll notice that it's in the final state called my published state. And in that state, you'll notice automatically in the workflow UI, a due date was applied automatically. And this is great for content expiry. So for those users or those business cases where you need to re-review your content periodically throughout the year to ensure that it's still valid, then you can add a due date or an expiry date to your final state called publish in my case. And after the 3 months is expired, it will automatically transition to the needs review state. Now, all of this great data that we went through can all be summarized in our activity report. So that approval data that we just completed there all lives on this particular page called the activity report, or also known as the workflow history. And what it does is it displays all the information that we just went through. So we had a version 3, the page was updated, that version 3 was updated and it was put into the ready state and on a date and time. And then the approval was assigned to review to L. She rejected it 11/21 and gave the reason why. The rejection was then sent to Milo. Milo rejected it, and then he updated that, and then it was sent back to Ready, and it was assigned to review by L. L said yes. She reviewed it. Milo reviewed it. Sorry, and L reviewed it, and then it was sent for final review by the editor-in-chief. The editor-in-chief said, looks, yeah. And then the workflow was now approved and it's in the published state. And you'll notice that it's currently in that expiry in the published date and ready to expire on October 8th of 2021. This can all be exported in case you need to display that to an auditor. Also, you can utilize the PDF exporter to export all this information into one sheet and display the content and this approval data all in one shot as well for this current version. Okay. So that's how you can display that information. Now, what's nice about this is that I've also put on here a page header with all this metadata on here. Well, this metadata not only supplies the page ID, so this is SOP ID is just the SOP numbers, is the page ID that I'm collecting. I have a status of published based on my workflow that I've initialized, the author, the date that it was approved, any final comments that were placed, and what version it's currently on, in this case, version number 4. So all this information was all supplied by metadata. So how is that all completed? Well, I'll get to that in just a second. But before I get there, I want to display to you a hierarchy of all pages in the space. And that hierarchy is our document report. The document report supplies what is known as our report and statuses of all pages. So you'll notice that current page that we were working with is currently in the published date and it expires in 3 months. I have other pages that are in progress and ready, but again, this supplies all pages in your space. As long as they have a workflow assigned to it, it will display this current status of those pages as well. Great for management to review and see what status all content is in as well. Okay. So as I mentioned, all this information is that we created here is all backed by Comala document management, and more importantly, by the workflow that you've designed. So that workflow is designed through document management in space tools, and only space administrators or global administrators are allowed to get to this area. And in fact, you can set up document management either globally or by the space as well. Now, the nice thing about setting it up globally is that only the global administrators would be allowed to modify the workflows, which would then be allowed to be active on a space itself. So you can see here that I have this one design review workflow that is activated from the global standpoint within the global Confluence administration page. And it could then be activated on the space itself by this space administrators. Space administrators won't be allowed to remove it, but they can make it apply to the page if they want to. Okay. Now, in this case, in my example, I have a bunch of different workflows you can see that are all listed here. And you'll notice that each of these workflows that are active are all appended by a label. And these labels can be called on a particular page. And so when that label is called on the page or applied to the page, it will also activate or initialize the workflow itself as well. And we also have a secondary feature behind that, which is ensures that users aren't able to remove the label, which is very important, especially for compliance regulatory needs. You can also add these labels to any of your space templates as well. So I have a template here that I've created. And if I edit this template, you'll notice that when I go to the label, my label called editor is applied. And so when a page is created with this particular template, that template activates this particular workflow that's assigned to it. And the nice thing about that is that users don't even know that the template exists. And because I've added it to the label itself. And so they would just go ahead and start creating all the content that they need. And once that content is created, that label is activated and it applies the workflow automatically, which is, again, the automation process is the nice flexible part about Comala document management. You set it and forget it. So these workflows, again, as I mentioned earlier, are all created through the workflow builder. And I can click on the edit beside the workflow name, and I have my workflow builder here. And the builder itself allows you to go ahead and start customizing the workflows. And you can customize any part of the workflow that you want. You can customize the names, um, the approval portion. So if I clicked on, for example, ready, that had an approval portion on it, now I have my approvals that I have. So there's two key elements to any state or phase of your workflow. So the ready is the state name, and assigned to that state, we have approvals and transitions. So you can go into the approval and start modifying your approval. So the approval here exists called review, and I'll click on that review approval to now modify any part of my approval. So I have three options when setting my approval, or my reviewers, I should say. I can set it to anyone, which basically means that anyone can come along and approve it if they stumble along the page. I can limit who I want to assign to review this as well. So I can click on limit and say users cannot, if I set users, those users will not be assigned to the UI. I can say users can be assigned to the UI, say users must be assigned to approve, or only one user must be assigned to approve. So those are options limiting who can be assigned to review or not review content. And then the last option is the ability to set my reviewer. So this is the automated process of being able to set either individual users or groups as well. I have advanced options behind that as well. So I can trigger in my e-signature functionality. So if you're going through ISO, if you're going through FDA approval or any other GDPR compliance approvals that you need, SOC 2, you can use our e-signature functionality. Now, the e-signature functionality can use just simple username and password to re-authenticate that the user is them, that is supplying the final approval. If you're using, for example, LDAP at work, then you can use our two-factor authentication as well. Two-factor authentication allows to authenticate through Google Authenticator. It allows you to authenticate through Microsoft Authenticator, or even 1Password, or any other two-factor authentication app that's out in the marketplace as well. And again, that's just a one-time password or OTP that can be applied as well. So we have the ability to go ahead and change the approval or reject buttons that we saw in the actual UI. And then we have conditions that can be applied. We can remember previous reviewers that were assigned. So these approvers would be recognized that they've been used previously, and they would be automatically show up as well if you're setting or limiting who you want to assign to review. Now that you've modified your approvals, you can get into your transitions. So your transitions allow you to move from one way, transition the arrows. So if I'm going from ready to approved, I want to set my approved to reviewed. So we have a set number of transitions. So we have approved, rejected, expired, task completed, and submit or select. And that allows you to select, for example, a state that I'm going to. So in this case, my transition is submitting from draft to ready, or I can select multiple states. So the user can select one or two different states if they need to as well. If I modify any of those transitions, for example, if I add in updated. So if a page is updated in the ready state, and I want to say it needs to go to needs review, then I can send this to needs review. If I update that, you'll see here now I have a new arrow applied here. And now it'll go to updated, goes to needs review, and it would need to be sent to be reviewed when a page gets updated if it's currently in the ready state. And I can easily modify that as well by just removing that and adding that, and I'll just reset your workflow builder itself. the navigation screen. Now, how did I add in the expiry? So I can add in the expiry by going to the, for example, the publish date and going in my left-hand side here, which is the working panel, and I can click on the published date name and click on the pencil icon, and I can now update the period to apply a due date to. Okay, now it's the final state. That's what indicates final. And I can update that to 3 months, 6 months, or whatever time period you want. Oops, I don't dismiss. And so now that I have my workflow applied, I can add additional customizations if I want by going through to our Markup Editor. And the Markup Editor allows for some really cool further customization. So for example, as I mentioned, we have templated emails that you can use that come out of the box. If you don't want to use those templated emails, you can configure those in the space itself to be turned off. And I can start using custom emails as well. And that's by using the trigger and macro called send email macro. And I can send out a review for this particular approval and send it to the editor in chief. And it'll give them this information of what that needs to be done with activity. This is just calling a macro called page activity. And that ends the actual send email portion of it. It'll trigger that off. I can set metadata in here as well. So as you saw earlier on the page itself, I had content data with SOP ID. So it's just picking up the page ID. And that was a SOP number. So the page ID is unique, and that's very important for SOPs. I also have date and time, version, approval, comment data, all supplied by metadata, and then it's being picked up off of my page header up top here, and it's applying that data onto the page itself. So again, folks, you can customize a workflow and add conditions and add metadata, add restrictions, all part and parcel of Comala document management, and all can be supplied to your workflow as well. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot of templated workflows. So when you go to add a workflow to a space, I can see that there's a bunch of different workflows, everything from simple approval workflow all the way down to the simple read confirmation workflow that come out of the box. If you need further workflows, we also have, again, for free for you with Comala Document Management, you can import additional workflows that we've built in our repository that you can also import as well. So if I need, for example, the QMS workflow, I don't see that in my dropdown. I can, when adding a workflow, I can import the QMS workflow, and that would be applied to to my space itself, and that would live under my document management dashboard, and I can now activate that as well. So that gives you a clear identification of what else can be imported as well. There's additional configuration, there's notifications. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough time to go through all that information, but feel free to look at all this information. And more importantly, if you do need more information on that, you can feel free to reach out to me, Daryl at Comalatech.com, or reach out to support at Comalatech.com, or our wiki at Comalatech.com. Again, all the information will be supplied to you via email after today's webinar. And the last thing that I want to touch on is, again, as I mentioned earlier, we do have apps that help supply content with not only the approval process, but also just with, for example, if you're working with knowledge bases or you're working with compliance and you want to be sure to supply certain pages to certain people, that's where our publishing app comes in place. And the publishing app allows you to sync data from one space to the other. So I have my draft space here, which would be recognized in my Vancouver space. And then I have a published space as well, which is called my Vancouver published. And this is where my content, as you can see, is completely different. In this case, because my content was changed. So now if I go through if I go and take a look at the draft information, you'll see that the page itself has all been updated. So I need to go ahead and go through my review process and approve this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll go through the approval process real quick. Now that it's approved, I'll refresh the page, and if I go to the published version, looks like that didn't get published. So we'll just publish that over. I can also do it manually as well. So I can go to publishing, and I can publish the entire space if I wanted to. And I can publish that information directly through. And now it'll tell me all the changes that are going to apply, what pages are going to be updated or removed, and it'll publish that through. Publishing is complete, perfect. And so now when I go back to my draft space, I'll see here that the content is now published. And so now if I go to my published version, here's my published version, and it's identical to my draft version. And so this is a space where if I have users that have no access to Confluence and I want them to be able to see that, I can have them go directly to that space. I can give them a link and they can go directly to that space and see all that great data. So I can go here, and this is my published space, as long as I've made that available to everyone. I didn't make that space available to everyone, but I'll log in as Sunny. She doesn't have access to that. So, but the published version itself will be displayed to all users that have access to it. And you can, again, set it up any way you want, anonymous or with access to the page. But the published version does show you the information that is visible to all users. And again, you'll notice that here, you're only seeing the content that you want displayed. You're not seeing any elements of the workflow that was approved to make it come here. So that's how Comala Publishing works with Comala Document Management for use cases of knowledge-based requirements. So that's great when you want one space as your draft and another space as your published space to identify unique areas that you may want to share with people outside of your DMZ. Folks, that's everything that I wanted to share with you today. I really do appreciate your time. We did go over a little bit. Unfortunately, we just don't have any questions today, so not a big deal. If anything does come up, feel free to reach out to me directly, Daryl@Comalatech.com. I know questions do come up from time to time after you start playing with it, so feel free to ask away. Or you can send an email for a request for support at support@Comalatech.com, or reach us at our Ricky@Comalatech.com as well. Have yourself a great day, folks. I really do appreciate you spending this time with us today. And stay safe. Bye for now.